With Liquor Barn, you can shop your favorite bourbon, that perfect bottle of wine, or discover something new. To place an order for pickup or delivery, download the Liquor Barn app, visit liquorbarn.com, or call your nearest Liquor Barn location. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our email list for all the latest news on products, promotions, and events. Liquor Barn, where Kentuckians go to celebrate life. Cheers!
Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my good friend, my bourbon drinking buddy, Matt. Matt, how you doing over there, man?
Hey, Mark. I'm doing really great. How are you doing this evening, this morning, this afternoon, whenever it is you all are listening?
Yeah. Well, it's evening for us, I think, right? Last night was a long night, so I can't even remember. I'm not sure what time of day it is now, but yeah. But I'm excited, man. This is a show we kind of got put together in the last few weeks, and I'm thrilled that we were able to do it. And we got a bonus guest as well tonight. So even just extra special. So I'm super, super excited about that one. I do want to thank all our sponsors, of course. We appreciate all their support. And Matt, with that said, man, let's just waste no time and jump right in. You want to tell everybody who we have with us?
I would love to. So we have a couple of repeat guests this evening. Joining us are the stars of episode 25 and 67, respectively. Denny Potter, the master distiller at Maker's Mark, and Jane Bowie, the master of maturation and director of innovation at Maker's Mark. Welcome back to the Bourbon Life Podcast, all.
Thank you. I'm just still processing that last title. I'm not exactly sure what any of that was.
Oh, I went back and listened to that show, Jane, and I was like, I've got to use all that again. So I put it all in there.
Her title has actually changed here.
Oh, it has.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. I'm so sorry.
No, it just
you wouldn't know. Job hasn't changed, just title changed. But no, excited to be here. Thanks for letting me tag along today.
Yeah, this is fun. Yeah, because it was, just so everybody understands, because it was going to be Denny on the show. He was a guest of ours on episode 25, way back when we were just newbies and kind of starting out. It was in July of 2020. So you guys can go back and check that show out as well. But COVID had just hit in March. So the world was rapidly changing. But we had Denny on the show and we had a great time. And so we were going to repeat with him tonight. And then I got a call today earlier from your marketing team. And I thought, man, here comes cancellation. Something's come up. And he's like, hey, would you be okay if Jane jumps in? I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? I mean, this will be great. So I'm excited. This is like the added bonus.
No,
the pressure.
Thank you for being flexible, guys, because I know I wanted to check with you first because that, as I've said many times, Jane is a very polarizing figure.
Oh,
so
thank you.
You got to tiptoe around that a little bit, but no, I mean,
we're tasting whiskey in my basement tonight for work. So we're neighbors.
And it was going to be awkward for me to be on this podcast while she's staring at me in the corner, just super jealous she gets that way. So you've made my life a little bit easier by blessing.
Well, we're all here to make your life easier,
yes,
Potter.
Oh, man. We got to lift up the superstars, right? That's what we're here for.
Yeah, exactly.
And we got to ride their coattails. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, that's how I've made it this far in the podcast. Just piggybacking off your coattails.
Matt, whatever. Well, we're thrilled to have you guys both back with us together. The two masters of makers. I think that's what we need to call this show. We have well, now you got a new title, Jane. So can you tell us what's the official? Can you tell us that or not?
Come on. I mean, it's better.
It's not a lot better.
It's not okay. All right.
I mean, it's impressive. I mean, it's
just head of innovation and blending. So all the formulation, which it was doing a lot of it anyway, and then really kind of pushing in that direction. Obviously, with Suntory, like there's that the blending team is quite strong. So I've been training under Shinji Fukuya out of Suntory for the last 18 months, and really
Okay.
So yeah.
Wow. Well, congratulations. So is this like brand new? First time anybody's heard that, right? So this is like breaking.
It's more of an internal thing. I look forward to not saying master of maturation.
I knew how much you love that from our last show.
I only love it because I'm obsessed with Andrea Wilson, but other than that, like I'm good.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say that's good company to be keeping there with that title, right?
Company after this guy amazing. Right here. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, before we jump into the show, let's talk real quick about what we've got poured up, because we've got, we've done. It's funny because with Maker's Mark, you've got different opportunities, different expressions, different things to drink. And Denny, we did 3 different things. Your first show, Jane, when you were on with Amanda Humphrey, we did 3 different expressions as well. And we're back with 3 even different expressions. So we got quite a lineup tonight. But the first one we have poured up is the Maker's Mark 101. So would one of you like to tell us about the 101 and its history and what it's about?
Yeah, I mean, the 101 is just a really interesting product because it's been around off and on within makers since the 60s.
Okay.
It's just really no focus on it. It's always been looked at, from the Samuels family perspective as a gifting whiskey. That's why you find that, the 101 will typically come in a gift carton. But for the longest time, I mean, we would introduce it to market, then it would pull back. I mean, there was never real focus on it. And then we started, what was it, Jane, probably two and a half years ago, I think we specifically released it for global travel retail.
Because it was always an international release for the most part. Like I've actually got a few here. The original had green wax, and then it was a gold label, gold wax. We stopped doing it. Your first stint, I'd been at the company, and we'd stopped doing it maybe a decade before.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of a Bill Senior and Margie Christmas whiskey. And honestly, Rob had a lot of passion for this product. And I remember when we were tasting to kind of reintroduce it, it felt like such a throwaway because you think Makers comes in at 90 proof. And then our cask strength is quite low at 110 usually because of that low entry proof. So it was like, is 101 really going to do something different? And when we sat down and tasted the 3 together, and I encourage people to do this, it's a mind-blowing tasting how different the 101 is from the classic and the cask, even though the proof points really aren't that different. So it's, and then once we started tasting, it was like, okay, there's a reason for this to exist. Like, let's not just do it because it's a historical proof point that, had some significant, I guess, memories for us. But yeah, it's kind of a distillery team favorite.
Yeah, it is. The people at the distillery, whether they're people on taste panel or when we have our Christmas parties or anything like that.
Our maintenance department loves this.
The maintenance guy. I'm like, guys, can we just hold off till Friday at like 30?
I can get them to do anything for me if I have 101.
Yeah. That's true.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's really cool. I didn't realize it had been around that long because I know on the bottle that I picked up this week, because I actually did not have a bottle of the 101. So, but yeah, I got the box, which is really cool. I like that. I think it says a limited release or a special release, or I can't remember. Matt, you've got the bottle out there with you.
It does. It says limited release 101 proof.
Yeah.
It's not, we only run it on the bottling lines maybe twice a year. I mean, it's very, very limited.
I gotcha.
And then for a while, like we said, it was just either in global travel retail. Then we were offering in the gift shop for a little bit. Now we do distribute it domestically, but not in very large quantities. I mean, just
Well, that's what after Bob had said, okay, here's 2 choices, and then can we do the 101? And I thought, yeah, that's not a problem. And then I thought, man, I don't have a bottle of that, and I thought, I'm gonna have to make sure I can track that down, because I was thinking it was a very special or limited release. But fortunately, I was able to pick it up at the local liquor barn, thanks to them. So,
Brad
yeah,
Williams.
yeah, Brad, that's right.
Yeah. Well, Bob was asking me, and I'm like, all right, I wonder, because I didn't think I had enough time to ship you guys anything,
Yeah, oh yeah, that's
but I'm like, I know, I'm pretty sure they can probably find some 101, but I'm
Yeah.
glad you found it. I mean, and the reason why, I mean, it's just such obviously it's got a nice nose, on the nose is very similar to, what you're going to get in both the classic and the cast strength, but the taste profile comes across a little creamier.
okay.
Right. So, it's a little bit mellower. It's got a really clean finish to it. No burn whatsoever, which is typical for a lot of the things we do. And it's just, it doesn't taste like 101 proof,
Right.
but, you're going to get a lot of the same notes that you get with the vanilla and the caramel.
See, I actually get more fruit and baking
On the
spices
101?
in the 101,
Yeah.
where
Do
I get like really intense barrel extractives in the cask. The classic is like, I think everything is so perfectly in harmony in this. I think but what you said is right. And what I think is so special about it is you get the accessibility of that classic 90 proof, but you get the flavor impact of almost a cast strength. So like, it's kind of the best of both, but
Right.
I definitely get more fruit and spice in this than I do the other 2.
Well,
Yeah.
And what's interesting is people will ask us, well, why do you do a 101 if you have a cask? Well, the 101 was out well before we did a cask.
Yeah.
I mean, the 101 is really just
More traditional.
It's because, it's kind of because, Bill and Margie were big on this being a gifting whiskey and it kind of having meaning to them and the Samuels family. We're just kind of upholding tradition with that, but it was out well before we ever did a cask.
Yeah. And that's really cool. I'm glad that you guys are still doing it. I'm glad I was able to pick up a bottle of. Matt, what are you picking up on the nose over there on this one, man?
I get a lot of vanilla on the nose. The baking spice comes across too, picking up a nice nose of nutmeg. And then I'm getting like nice juicy strawberry, like a sweet red fruit with it as well. And then a nice aroma of just like fresh baked bread. It's got that nice honey wheat aroma to it. Just a really nice, warm kind of smell to it. It's really, really nice.
Yeah, it's definitely got a very inviting nose. Like you said, it's got that spiciness to it, but it's got that sweetness as well. The vanilla, I mean, that's Maker's Mark, vanilla. My 2 favorite, vanilla and caramel, Matt. So I can always use those.
We got a lot in common, Mark.
There you go. So let's, we've done this before. We did the show and we had a great time learning about both of you individually, and I don't want to rehash everything, but I love your stories. So can you guys each just take Jane, you're just going to tell us all about Denny? And no, I'm just kidding. If you guys,
do we want this factual or fictional? I don't know.
Whichever sounds better.
I don't know
what's more interesting.
Yeah. That's just, we can make this, it's like, is it real or is it a lie? So you can just make up a bunch of shit and then people have to figure out, Denny, if it's really
it's like that 3 truths and a lie thing.
There,
right?
yeah, there you go. We'll just have fun on the podcast doing that.
Why don't you introduce yourself first?
Oh,
yeah,
you go first.
Oh.
Age before beauty.
Oh,
yeah. So I mean, oh my goodness, I hate.
He's
talking
so
about
uncomfortable talking about himself in front of me.
I just in general, but yeah, in front of you, yeah, because if I say one thing wrong, I'll hear about it tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, yeah, as you guys know, I mean, I went to, born in Louisville, but grew up in Madison, Indiana. That's what I consider, my hometown. Went to Indiana University.
To study what?
I got a bachelor's of science in biology.
Because you wanted to do what?
I wanted to be a marine biologist.
So we went to Indiana University.
At least you didn't call it University of Indiana this time.
Well,
yeah,
for 15 years.
Well, I mean,
ooh, that's UI, right?
Yeah,
UI.
right.
Yeah.
No, the plan was a bachelor's in biology I was thinking, maybe I was going to go to med school. Maybe, I don't know, you name it. I could have done it.
He could have done it,
but
Jane.
ultimately, I really wanted to be a marine biologist. And so I was going to get my master's in marine biology. So graduated, life happened, had debt and needed to start working. So right out of college, started working in a hazardous waste lab. So that's what I did. I profiled hazardous waste. So,
kind of the opposite of cleaning oceans.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Hazardous waste. Sorry, keep going.
So anyway, just profiled hazardous waste. Did that for about 2.5 years, and then ended up working as a lab tech at Jim Beam for Claremont and Booker No. So did that for a year. Got into the kind of I call it the environmental side of the business. What I was really doing was I was a turd herder. So I was a certified wastewater treatment plant operator or supervisor. Let's qualify that. And we also had a drinking water plant. So I supervised both of those and then did a lot of the environmental stuff. And then at the same time, was involved in like relief operations. Bumped over to Makers in 2003 as quality manager. And late 2003 took over for Steve Nally in the distillery as distillery manager, reporting into Dave Pickerel, and ended up becoming assistant master distiller and director of distillery operations. Then and then was asked to go run our rum distillery down in St. Croix, Virgin Islands, which was Crucian Rum. Went there for 3 years. It was a 3-year assignment. Came back and went to Jim Beam Frankfurt. Was there for a year. Left the company and went to Heaven Hill, and then ended up being VP of Ops and Master Distiller at Heaven Hill. And then about 3.5 years ago, came back to Makers as Master Distiller and Plant Manager. So,
and the rest is history.
And that wastewater, that's not I forget. That's the part of
She's being serious.
No, I am being serious because that's part of your career I always forget about, and that has served you as well as any stint you had as far as learning that before you learn the distillery. Usually, people get thrown into the distillery and then have to go learn the back half, the wastewater. It's the tail that wags the dog, is what we always say. But the fact that you started there and then went to the distillery has served you really well.
I love that. I mean, I love that.
He truly does.
I do.
It's marine biology, right?
In a way. I mean, there's, it's not zooplankton, but there's bacteria and there's
there's a lot of bacteria.
There's stuff in there, right?
Yeah. So that it is an important part. I mean, it is it's the part nobody wants to think about or worry about, and I thrive in that. I love it. So
well, hopefully you never mixed up the wastewater part with the drinking water part and had any mishaps with that.
No, completely separate.
Tell them now. Okay, so tell them one of the funny things happen even when you're a huge distillery that has been doing this for a long time. So Denny's second day back at Makers Mark this time. We have a meeting in the main office, and I come in and I go to the bathroom, and it looks like there is basically shit coming down off the ceiling. And I go in ready to gasp, and then I'm like, it smells amazing in here. What has happened? What is the smell? I'm like, Denny, I think something's happened. Second day back.
Yeah. So I mean, I mean, visually it didn't look good.
It looked awful.
But because it had come up in the sinks and the
toilet had exploded.
But I knew right away. I mean, you could tell by the smell that it was mash.
Right. Oh, wow. Okay.
So what had happened was we had a thick mash in one of the mash tubs, which can happen. It's, if you have a power outage, you don't get the malt in, things can start to set up a little bit. There are things that can happen within mashing that cause it to be very thick. So they were working to try to pump it out. So one of the things they had done was it had kind of jammed up. So they put a water hose on the discharge side of the pump to flush that out, right? To flush it out. So they forgot to valve off the water hose. They had kicked the mash pump on, and it traveled through the garden hose back into, and our check valve failed, right? So
Yeah.
that our cross connection had failed, and so it went up into the city water line that led back into the main office. And yeah, we had mash coming up
Of
to
all-
the sink. Thank God nobody was in there.
Oh,
I mean, not that it would have been hurt. It just would have been very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable.
Denny's like,
I
what
was
the
like-
hell are you all doing?
I was-
It's like,
What is going on? And,
look,
I mean,
what did I come back to?
Dude,
What the
there was
hell?
just mash everywhere.
Oh God.
it almost shut. I mean, it literally almost shut the plant down for a little while because we were trying to figure out where all it went.
And you're looking around for Ashton Kutcher, right? For like,
Yeah, right.
You're being punked,
Yeah, I'm like,
right?
all right, this is a joke. So somebody,
Yeah, I'm being punked.
I had a really good job at heaven.
Sorry, maybe that story's not as fun as I think it is.
No,
It was
I think it's great. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Jane. But one thing, Denny, about your career, you've had the opportunity to work with some pretty big names, and I think that's one thing that maybe a lot of people don't realize or aren't aware of. But I mean, even there you got to work with Fred at Jim Beam.
I met
right?
Fred. I mean, my first day in the industry working as a lab tech, I had parked in the parking lot, Green. I had interviewed there, but I really didn't know where the hell I was going. And this guy's like, hey man, what's your name? Introduced myself. He said his name was Fred. And he's like, where are you working? I said the lab. He's like, follow me. He takes me on in, and Fred leaves and walks out, and our lab manager, her name was Lynn DeLue. That was her married last name was DeLue. Her first name was Lynn. Amazing person. But anyway, she's like, how the hell did you pull that off? I'm like, what? She's like, your very first day, Fred No walks you into the lab. I'm like, Fred No. I was like, oh. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, I was 24, 20.
You worked with Booker as well, though.
Booker was coming in and out. I mean, he wasn't involved on a daily basis, but I was lucky enough to take distillate samples because I was in the lab to Booker's house, because Booker would want to approve what samples, what distillate was going to be used for Booker's, but he also liked to cook with the distillate. So I got a couple times I got to actually go to Booker's house and drop off distillate samples for him. And this was all in my first year of the industry. But no, I have been, there is no doubt. I don't know of anybody that's been able to have the time that I've had with some of these incredible people in the industry. I mean, everybody has met, obviously, a lot of the people that, or all of the people that I've been able to meet, but actually work with. I mean, it's been absolutely phenomenal. But Fred Booker, and then now Freddie, who's a great guy. Go to Makers. And so the crazy thing about Makers at the time, we did not realize it. But in 2003, my first year at Makers, we had 4 master distillers, or what would become master distillers, all at Makers at the same time. And we only had 16 salaried positions. 1/4 of the people that we had salaried would go on to be master distillers. And it was myself, crazy. Steve Nally, Dave Pickerel, and Kevin Smith.
Yeah. I mean, that's just that. Yeah, it is. It really is. And a lot of people didn't know that about your history, Denny. So I just think that's super impressive. So
interesting though about the breadth of people. Sorry to not just operations, but when you look at what a Max Shapiro's done, or a Bill Samuels, right? Getting to have those people mentor you as well, just from the business brain, the marketing experience you get working on Makers, whether you're in operations or not, their philosophy is everything goes together. You're not just thinking of one aspect, you're taking the brand holistically all the time. Yeah. So I think it's not even just the people, but the breadth of knowledge you've gained.
Nuts. Parker and Craig.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, those, and then, I'm running a rum distillery with the Nelthrips, right?
Started,
I mean, Gary's name is, they started Cruising Rum. I mean, it's been crazy. I just feel very, very lucky.
You should feel lucky.
And now you get to work with Jane. I mean,
work with me.
That's right.
Every day.
Speaking of which, Jane, tell us about your background and your past. The good parts.
I started in the industry 2007. So I had spent 4 years out of college traveling, doing odd jobs to make money, and then I'd live out of a 40-liter backpack for as long as I could make the money last, and then I'd work more. And so I got bit by the travel bug. So when I started at Makers, I applied and kind of pitched them a job to be, I didn't know the word for it, but ended up being their global brand ambassador. So that was my first gig at Makers Mark. I looked after 9 different countries, traveled, introducing people kind of a drink at a time. And actually, when I started, it was you, Kevin, and Dave. And that was who I trained under, because, you know, Bill's whole thing was, they're going to eat you alive if you don't know what you're talking about out there. So actually, like, I remember you taught me how to propagate yeast. I still don't know that I truly understand what that is.
I'm not going to tell you what we actually got out of that. It's at the CDC.
But that was my first day with Denny, with propagating yeast.
Yeah.
So, and you talk about 3 different approaches to making whiskey. Holy cow. But did the sales, marketing, advocacy thing for, 7 years. And then kind of started moonlighting in innovation on the side as like a side hustle. Just because I wanted to be in the liquid so bad. And the dream, it's one of those places, Bill and Rob encourage you to kind of challenge yourself and take on things, whether there's no swim lanes at Maker's Mark. So it was always I want to be the person that decides what liquid goes in the bottle. And they're like, nice. That's not really a job. Like, we got that. We don't need you for that. And so really it was just nagging and hanging around and raising my hand. And so I've been doing the liquid development and the innovation stuff for about 7 years.
Probably. Yeah.
8 years. Yeah. So started working on Private Select in 2014. So that was my first real innovation project. So yeah. So I've been with Makers my entire career, 15 years.
That's very cool. That's a great thing to say.
Head of innovation and blending.
Yes.
There you go. Officially.
But you're no longer master of
I don't think so. I don't think there's any maturation. My claim to fame is every title I've had at Makers has never been a title I was the first person to have that title.
So you invented the job, right?
I've created all my jobs.
There you go. That's really good. Yeah. Just keep making up jobs and being the person that does it, right?
Yeah.
So Matt, let's jump back into the 101 real quick. Get some thoughts on terms of the palate and the finish on this. What do you get?
It's got that real nice, sweet, warm taste up front. I'm picking up like a lot of French toast type taste, a little cinnamon, some vanilla on there. Definitely the honey wheat comes across too on the flavor as well. But this does have some fruit to it. I pick up some nice like cherry, a little bit of that strawberry comes through as well. Maybe even like a touch of like a touch of apple, like a green apple with it as well. So just really, really nicely done. Very, very, very enjoyable.
Yeah. And I think Denny, you'd said, I think you talked about it, like coating the mouth and things earlier. It definitely does. I mean, you get a really nice, viscous mouthfeel off of this one. But Matt, you're right, that the spicy, the cinnamon, it comes through to me. I get a lot of cinnamon off of that. But I mean, it's a great pour. I've never had the 101 before. I'm just kind of surprised I'm surprised that I'd never had, but I really like this. And it drinks, it's when you get to that 100 proof level, I think some people get a little afraid if they're, an 85 or 90 proof drinker. Once you get into that triple digits, people start kind of freaking out on it. But this is something that's easy. I don't want to say it's an easy drinker, but it's a very approachable.
Yeah.
101.
Yeah. We use that one a lot for 101.
Yeah, definitely. Well, guys, I tell you what, let's take a quick break, get a word from our sponsors, and we'll move on to round 2 here in just a minute. So everybody just sit tight. We'll be back with more with Denny Potter and Jane Bowie from Maker's Mark in just a minute.
Three Chords line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The 3 Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they called Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.threechordbourbon.com.
Spirits of French Lick crafts their spirits using only the finest agricultural product that has defined character, following their motto, respect the grain. They lead the way in representing the quality of the Hoosier artisan distilling process while paying tribute to its inseparable past. By implementing best practices from those early times, combined with modern touches, Spirits of French Lick has created a truly unique place in the industry. Spirits of French Lick products are distributed throughout Indiana, Kentucky, and Missouri, and can also be purchased online through Sealbox at sealbox.com. Visit spiritsoffrenchlick.com to learn more information and make sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram. All right, everybody, welcome back for round period session, whatever you want to call it, number 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I am your host, Mark, and with me as always, live in the Bourbon Life studios, is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing tonight, man?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing really great, man. How about yourself?
I'm hanging in there. We're having a good time tonight. This is a fun show. We don't have to say anything. This is like my favorite podcast episode where you and I can just sit there and just listen.
Yeah, listen and drink and
drink. That's right.
This is like
listen.
Perfect.
Yeah. If we could have every show like this, maybe we can just have Denny and Jane just come on the Bourbon Life every show.
I think the crazy part about it is you just mic'd up Jane's Innovation Lab. It's the same. Like this.
Actually, I think we're really on good behavior right now.
Yeah, we are. Like I don't know that I've dropped an F-bomb.
You haven't? I've noticed.
You haven't. I mean, and this is not a kid-friendly show. So if you feel so inclined to drop that, Denny, don't feel like you have to hold back.
I fucking won't. So now
we've broken the ice on that one. So
oh my God,
yeah.
I'm the worst.
Oh man. But Matt, I guess you should tell everybody, if they're joining us, who we do have with us as our guest tonight.
Absolutely. We've got the master distiller, Denny Potter, and the head of innovation and blending, Jane Bowie from Maker's Mark, joining us this evening. And we are back for round or session number 2, and we are drinking one of my favorites. If you want to let our listeners know what we've got poured up.
I'll throw it to you guys, Jane and Denny.
I think, we're doing the FAEO2, right?
The FAEO2.
Yeah. So I'm going to let Jane describe this because obviously, I'm trying to be serious.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll stop laughing in the background.
No. But, Jane pretty much created the private select program. I mean, what's interesting about like the wood finishing was a lot of that was born out of 46 when we were tasked with creating, Bill Jr.'s taste vision. But we had all these guardrails, right? Well, anyway, that led to, this stave finishing technique and everything else. And then what, Jane has done with that to elevate the entire thing through private select and then the wood finishing. So this was the FAEO2 was the second release in 2021, but you actually did their podcast and did the first one.
Yeah.
Right?
So all of these start with the taste vision. So we have a core team. There's 4 of us. So it's myself, Denny, Beth Buckner, who's our innovation manager. She came from quality, amazing palate, highly technical as far as analytics and able to really look at the DNA of the whiskey under a microscope and draw correlations. And then Rob Samuels, I don't need to tell you who he is. So the 4 of us kind of agree on a taste vision. And then really Beth and I go to work on bringing these to life with Andrew Webrink, an independent stave company. And then the 4 of us are tasting and kind of agreeing. Well, what we do, the whole series, Bill Jr. laughs at us. He's like, are y'all just talking to yourselves with this series? And we're like, we are. It's a storytelling series that we're kind of celebrating some of the things we do at Makers that we've not lost over the 70 years of, finding efficient and more modern ways to do things, right? The things that really make Makers. So year 1, we celebrated yeast. Year 2, wood seasoning. So last year, FAE is just code for fatty acid esters. So it's all wood finishing, but it's just, we want to celebrate the fact that, Denny stills are still those traditional stills they had in the 1940s and 1950s, that small rectifying section, not very many stripping plates. You're getting really heavy congeners that we don't chill filter, right? It's something we've never done at Makers. It's not a good thing, not a bad thing. It's just something we don't do because of viscosity.
And it's crazy because it's gotten to be something that people kind of seek out, and it's just nothing we've ever done. Like it just hasn't been. It's the first time we've ever really talked about it, and people are amazed when we say we don't chill filter. We don't have a chill filter. Like we don't have the capability to chill filter, but that's why this was a pretty cool project to take on.
So when we started talking about that process in particular, we got into this huge internal debate about flavor versus texture, right? And they're both really important to the drinking experience, right? And when we were trying to cram it all into one, there became some competing tastes going on. And so we decided, let's do 2 whiskeys. The FAEO one was all about flavor. So if you remember that one, it was like heavy fruit and tobacco and a lot of dank wood, and it had like a really weird, funky, aggressive finish. And that was this whiskey. It's the first time we've truly ever done a whiskey that was all about texture. And it was so interesting because Denny was very passionate about this whiskey, because when we went to go talk about the tasting notes, we wanted it full bodied, we wanted it creamy, and the flavors that come with that are really caramel. Well, we taste together every day, and it's so funny. We'll be tasting the same whiskey, and I'll be like, God, I love, this is the best finish. And Denny will be like, oh, that finish was terrible. I like long, dry, astringent. He wants like clean and crisp, right?
Right.
His big thing with this was it needs to be a clean finish. Like that is Makers to a core. It's full body, but it's clean finish. This was a bitch to make. This whiskey was a hard one because we were and tactile is so much more specific, and it's less subjective. It's right. Flavor is very subjective. Texture is not. It's very objective. So this one, like, if we're gonna say it's texture forward, it better be texture forward. So this was a hard.
So it's like, I guess thinking about it in terms of like the aromas of the flavors. I mean, you're going to smell things, and you're going to have different people are going to pick up different notes, different things. But when you feel something, like if you use your hand and touch a desk, it's like, oh, that's smooth or that's cold. So when you're drinking whiskey, that texture you get in your mouth, I mean, it's going to be pretty much the same for everybody, or it should be.
You'll have we've mapped our palates, so we actually know the DNAs of our individual palates to make her smart. But
I'm adopted. It was a weird revelation.
We could not tell that from the 28 alleles we got from your palate.
They didn't match with mine.
But some people have more homes for astringency or other things, but for the most part, you nailed it. It's very objective. So this was an interesting one.
Yeah, I'm big, Mark. I mean, texture to me is probably the most important. I mean, I just start there. Like it's got to, I've learned to like dry, longer. I mean, you just kind of, you're always in different moods. And so there are times where, this might be a little better than that. I will always lean more towards kind of that, that creamy kind of finish,
or
very
spice.
viscous.
It's got some nice spice.
It's got some great baking spice notes on this.
Yeah. And speaking of which, Matt, what are you picking up in terms of the nose on that one?
I love the nose on this one. It's super fruity. I get a lot of really juicy fruit, a lot of like nice tart raspberry and blackberry, and like really juicy strawberry on it as well. But there's also like an essence of like pipe tobacco, or kind of like this like smoky, toasty aroma on it as well. I love this one so much. This is absolutely one of my favorites.
Yeah, I agree that the fruitiness is there, not like the FAE01, but the I forgot what I was going to say now. Damn it. I was so impressed with what I was saying. I just completely.
You blew your own mind.
I did, man. I was like, oh my God, I actually picked out something that I could say beyond vanilla and caramel. And then it was like, whoop, just, God damn it. I hate when that happens, but, man, I'll come back to it. I'll circle back to it.
Mark, I'm like that. I mean, that's one of the, like, between Jane and I, like, I probably have like 12 descriptors.
I always say Denny has three adjectives.
I mean, in my mind, I know exactly what I'm tasting and, you know, how I equate that to what I'm going to say. Like, the toughest thing, and then we can talk for a while about this, is, you know, when you have a taste panel, or even like the four of us, right? Whether, you know, me, Jane, Beth, and Rob, it's how do you know, to be able to verbalize what you're tasting is probably the bigger talent than just being a good taster, right? I mean, it's very, very difficult. You know, it's something that, you know, through time and the more you do it, you know, you kind of get better at it. But, you know, like, Jane is so much better at describing what she's tasting, because I'll sit there and be like, oh yeah, I do get, I get what you're saying.
Then it's even the shorthand of like, my peanuts are your beets. And learning like when he's saying one thing, I know that shows up for me in a totally different way. So you start to learn each other's vocabulary as well.
Yeah. But it's a tough thing, you know, like, it's one thing, like, when we're doing like innovation projects and, you know, we're creating something new. It can be another thing when you're on the taste panel and you're tasting the same liquid and people are describing it different ways. You're like, well, wait a second, you know, we need to make sure we all calibrate here, because we've been making the same whiskey for 68 years. We should not have some of these crazy descriptors that are starting to pop up. And usually it is that, just kind of that disconnect on how people describe similar taste. I mean, it's we spend a lot of time, you know, because we probably have 25 people on taste panel roughly. Yeah. We spend a lot of time on training, and then training people on how to describe what they're tasting. And that's a tough one.
So I came back to it. It actually popped back in my head as you were talking, and I took another sniff, but it's almost like a burnt sugar type of aroma to me. Maybe even lending towards like a maple syrup. You know,
those were descriptors that we had for this, actually.
Is it? Okay. Yeah. Cause I was so excited because I was like, oh, I got it. And then I was like, oh no, I lost it.
But we decided to talk a little bit more so you could collect your thoughts and kind of come back to it. Yeah.
I
just didn't know how to describe it, Mark.
That's exactly right.
Trust me. I appreciate those moments too, Mark.
I appreciate that, Denny. And Matt, you know, Matt's worked in the restaurant industry. Matt's worked at a bakery. He's got this wonderful palate, and he's got all these memories and all these experiences that he can really relate those flavors when he picks it up, when he smells it, when he tastes it. It instantly relates to something to him. So he's throwing out cardamom. He's throwing out all these, you know, these flavors that I'm like, wait, what?
I ate Hot Pockets for 12 years. So
there you go, man. It's like,
you know, in ramen noodles. Like, it was, remember I wanted to be a marine biologist? Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Right. So, well, you know, in the first round, we have a little segment. We call it the off hours segment. And I forgot to do it because I was so excited. We're just talking and having a great conversation. But it's sponsored by Off Hours Bourbon. And what we like to do, we'd like to ask our guests what they enjoy to do during their off hours. So usually when we're talking about ourselves or yourselves individually, so if you don't care, just to take a minute or two and just when you're not in the distillery and you're not working, what do you guys enjoy doing in your off hours?
God, I'm gonna sound.
Can you tell us?
I'm gonna sound like such an alcoholic when I say it. I mean, well, you know, there's, for me right now, like I've got one kid that's in college and my daughter's a senior in high school. So like right now, the off hours are, you know, she's playing tennis right now. That's where I was right before we did this podcast. So that's a big part of it. I mean, I enjoy socializing. I mean, I enjoy. If I know people
coming to my house.
Yeah, I'm here a lot because I'm good friends with Jane's husband as well. So, but I mean, you know, like I do like to fish. I don't get to fish near as often as I used to. I'm hoping with my daughter graduating high school, I can get back to that a little bit.
Yeah, in just a few months, you'll be out there.
Yeah, no kidding. But I mean,
Out
yeah,
there
I don't know.
ripping
I mean,
lips.
let's hope so, Matt. Let's hope so. Never know. I mean, we're awfully busy at the distillery, so we've always got that. But that's the other thing too. Like a lot of what we do, even in our off hours, are centered around our industry, and not because we feel like it's work. Like this does not feel like work. This is fun. Like we enjoy this. Like who else gets to work in an industry where you have so many people that are so interested in what we do and how we do it? And then, the people within the industry, like you all, or people at other distilleries, just to go hang out and talk. And, it really is, we have passion jobs, and we are surrounded by other people, being in Bardstown, especially, that have similar jobs. And it's just fun being around people like that.
I spent all day last Saturday visiting other distilleries.
Oh, that's great though. I mean, that's, if you're that passionate about it, then, it's great when you can do what you love and what you enjoy, and you actually enjoy what you do. I mean, you can't ask for more, in life. As I've gotten older, I learned, money can only do so much. But if you're in a position or a job where you're just unhappy with what you're doing and you're not making a difference, or you're not enjoying it, it's not worth it. So
yeah, it's true.
So that's your off hours, Jane. You go to other distilleries and just check it out.
I'm a 5-year-old. And so
okay.
Finally, we're out of COVID. I like to travel. It's still my number one passion, probably, with whiskey. So we've started traveling a lot again, safely, but that's I look forward to that. And then I grew up on Lake Cumberland. We have a boat and a house down there. So I go home a lot, and we live on the lake in the summers. So
sure.
That's probably, and then I like to hang out with friends and sip a little stuff.
When you say hang out, you leave the door unlocked. Like
you have a key.
Yeah, I do have a key. Yeah.
My daughter's in case of emergency person.
There you go. That's nice.
Yeah.
That's good to have. When you can work with people that you actually like, that's a win-win right there, right?
Yeah.
For sure. So guys, let's talk about some big news that's happened recently for you all at the distillery. You are now a B Corp certification or certified company, right?
Yes.
And a lot of people don't probably understand or know what that is, but it's kind of a big deal, as Ron Burgundy would say. But can you all talk about that process, what it means for you all as a distillery?
Yeah, I mean, B Corp is, it's a certification that you get. It's an external certification registration. You can describe it any way. That is centered around just sustainability, right? And, not just environmental sustainability, but also like human sustainability. So yes, it's an accreditation that you can get that is recognized in the business world that says, wow, these people kind of go above and beyond when it comes to environment, human capital, charitable giving. Like these are all things.
Community.
It's a big deal. So, you have people like Patagonia that have B Corp certification.
Ben and Jerry's.
Ben and Jerry's, Allbirds, which is, they, do shoes. So these are, it's kind of, it's the other thing about it, it's extremely transparent. And what I mean by that is, they come in and audit you, and they score you based on all these different areas, right? So like they want to know how much you paying your employees, right? What benefits do you offer for your employees?
Yeah.
I mean, not a lot of people like to give that information out, and then you get scored on that. They look at how you market, right? How you market your product. Your packaging, is it recyclable? They're looking at DE&I, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So what programs do you have in place for that? So, and then, as we've said before, the charitable giving side, like what do you give back? And maybe it's not all financial, but what else are you doing for the community?
How are you active in the community and giving? How are you making your community around you better?
So there's a lot of that. And then, there is a lot of it that's tied to, what are your goals going forward? And we will hold you accountable for those that are, specifically centered around sustainability, right? So, we have solar power. We actually have a solar field that is on or a solar array that is on our warehouse site in Loretto that actually generates enough electricity to power all 46 of our barrel warehouses.
Oh,
Right.
wow.
So that's a big deal. We've got ambitious goals, which we should reach, honestly, by the end of this year, being a zero landfill operation. Nothing goes to the landfill. And then tied to that, we have an ambitious goal within the next 10 years to be a waste to energy facility. So how can we take some of this waste stream and actually convert it to energy, right? Whether it's to power the distillery, whether it's to put back on the grid for the community of Loretto. There are a lot of things like this. I think, and obviously recycling is a part of this. And recycling kind of gets, it's a term that's been around forever, right? Everybody says they recycle, but our recycling is a little bit different because we don't have access to any recycling centers, right? So we have to go above and beyond how we recycle. So a lot of times we are recycling internally, whether it's food waste, whether it's glass that gets pulverized. These are things that we are actually reusing. But the really cool thing about it is, because we know the community doesn't recycle, we take their recyclables.
Oh,
So they actually can bring their recyclables into makers, and we will handle it that way. And it all ends up, none of it ends up in the landfill. We will, take it to the different avenues where we need to.
You should see this composter we just got.
Yeah, it's called
a hot rocket.
It's called a hot rock. A hot rock.
Hot rod.
Hot rocket.
hot rocket, like a hot rocket.
Rod? Is it hot rod?
Hot rod.
I never knew it was hot rod.
Oh my God, we've been talking about it forever.
I don't really listen.
Yeah.
No.
I wasn't paying. I missed that memo.
Well,
I wasn't paying.
in full transparency, neither of us are the best person to talk about B Corp. He lives it a lot and every day. And I think that is not my sweet spot. But I think what I love about B Corp and what I've learned from Kim Harmon, who is our director of environmental health and safety at the distillery and does all of our sustainability, is the community aspect. And to your point, it's not just about, it really is about how you treat your employees, and you're held accountable. And then you get access to these companies like Patagonia, who've been best in class, and suddenly you're part of this club. And so she talks to these other people all the time from these other companies, and they're helping you be better, because B Corp started as businesses asking for this. It wasn't some government. It was, we want to understand, because consumers want to know who they buy their products from, and they want to know that they're treating the community, the environment, and their people well. That was the whole way it started. It's really amazing, actually.
And it's the transparency part that not a lot of people want to open up, show their books, show their benefits, show their wages, show their environmental performance. And so, it really was, but we also recognize the fact, as Jane was saying, that, today's consumer, and especially the consumer 10, 15, 20 years from now, this will be directed, right? This will be mandated to a degree in what, on the consumables that people want to buy. So it's really trying to stay ahead of that. It's trying to do the right thing. And the really cool thing about this is, typically when you go for this, you'll get your first assessment, and you'll have at least a couple years to where, you need to work to improve that score. We got it the first time. We literally got it on the first assessment, because these were things that we were already living. But that being said, we have a long list of things that we can be better at. So that's the thing that I love about it is, we have a set, 12-year plan on where we want to be from a sustainability aspect. And then not only that, we'll be held accountable to that. Not just by B Corp, but the people that are within B Corp.
Right.
So it's a really cool, and it is. Trust me, when we first started talking about this, I had to do a lot of research, because the first thing I thought, there are a lot of, call yourself, what the hell does green mean anymore, right? Or organic. It's easy. Okay, well, is B Corp just another way that you pay somebody to get this? No, it is a very intense process. As Jane said, Kim Harmon kind of spearheaded, everything we needed to do to get us accredited. She's actually would be somebody that would be great to join us at some point. on a podcast, and I think she has done a couple. But it, for us, it was a huge undertaking, and we're super proud of it. It's not something that, we're going to throw out there and lead with all the time. But if people are interested in B Corp, we'll talk to you about it.
It speaks to our culture, ultimately. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And your motto, I'm going to make sure I get it right. Make your mark, leave no trace.
Leave no trace. Yep.
Yeah. So that really, I mean, that goes hand in hand with that, right? I mean, that's really, really what you all want to do.
It. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just really cool. I mean, and you're the only, if I got the information right, I think you're the largest distillery to receive that certification, and you're the only one in Kentucky to have that. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes, we are.
Yeah.
And listen, I mean, we've got a lot of our distillery partners out there. I think they'll do this too. I think a lot of them are doing the right things. It's just it is very difficult to go through that process. It's just dedicating the time and energy. And I think, hopefully with us leading the way, I definitely think you're going to see some of the others do the same thing.
We've led seminars for the industry on how to do this. This isn't we want this and not you. This is if you can get everyone thinking this way, the world's going to be better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
No, that's just, yeah. That's really cool. So let's jump back to the whiskey, because we're almost in round 2 here. Believe it or not, man, we could sit here and talk for hours. It's like, I got to keep an eye on the clock, because I'm like, oh, okay. So Matt, what are you getting in terms of the palate and the finish on this FAE02? I know you really like this one, but
I do. And I think it's the palate that really seals it for me on this one. It's got the sweetness right up front, but the creaminess and the mouthfeel and the coating on it. It might just be because we're just now finishing up Easter. So the Easter Peeps candies have come along, but to me, there's I forget what company that makes it, but they have like a strawberry cream filled like chocolate egg or something. And just that like strawberry nougat on the inside that just like gets stuck everywhere in your mouth. And is just so terrible for you, but I love it so much. But it's just got this really, really bright, fruity flavor to it. Just really coats the tongue, coats the roof of the mouth. A nice, long, heated finish with baking spice that comes through all the way, and a good, nice remnants of oak and like a little bit of that oaky tannic effect on the end, but certainly not unpleasant in the least. It's just absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I don't get that drying, astringent that you talked about earlier, Jane. I think you'd mentioned that Denny does not like that. So I'm like, yeah, I don't detect that in any way, shape, or form. To me, that I mentioned like the burnt sugar or maybe even maple syrup on the nose. That is really the initial flavor to me when I taste it. It's almost like a dessert in a glass. There's a sweetness, and it comes across to me again with that kind of toasty, maple syrupy, burnt sugar type of flavor, but that spiciness comes through as well. And again, I didn't even mention this one is actually 109.1 proof. So we have stepped up some proof points here, but again, at 109.1, I think this is still a very approachable bourbon that people could easily enjoy. And I don't have any water, but I would think that maybe even dropping some water just to see how it opens up or changes as well, or even maybe with an ice cube. I usually don't use ice in my drinks, but I'd be curious to see how it works in this one. Jane, you're the expert on this one. So what does it change that much when you add a little bit of water? Or?
I think all of these wood finishings change pretty drastically with water.
Really?
There's so much flavor packed in because you've taken a fully matured whiskey and then you've shoved really intense virgin oak, and this is French oak, so you're talking even more flavor. So I think the water and ice changes it drastically, and we do a lot of that. Our process for these whiskeys, we taste them exhaustingly in the lab for months and months and months and months, and then when we're in final stages, we bring them home, and usually you come over and we drink these whiskeys in a more social environment over ice, neat, with a beer back, with water, with a hot toddy if it's winter, right? Like we see how they translate into other serves just to go, I can evaluate this in a lab and we think it's good, but do I want to sit and drink this at home with my husband and my friends? Like, does it translate that way?
Yeah.
And so they do. This one, to me, it's interesting. You talk about burnt sugar and because I'm not a big sweet drinker. And what I love about this one, it's like the perception of sweetness without tasting really sweet. So like to your point, it's like those things are there, but they're not beating me over the head sweet. It's just there's a lot of sweet perception, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. That makes a lot of sense. I can definitely see what you're saying. And I forgot to talk about this, but all of these are the same mash bill, right? I mean, all the makers' products are that same makers wheated mash bill. And now are all these about, in terms of aging, about the same age?
They're it's all about 6 years old.
6 years,
classic makers, and then the finishing lengths are going to be different depending on the product.
Depending on which one it is. So that's what I thought. I just wanted to throw that out there so everybody was aware of what we were. I mean, everybody knows that Makers is wheated mash bill bourbon, but I just wanted everybody to understand that everything we're drinking is the exact same mash bill, just different finishings and things on it. So, well, guys, we're at the end of round 2. So let's take another quick break, get a word from our sponsors. And we'll be back with more with Jane Bowie and Denny Potter from Maker's Mark in just a minute.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final round of the Bourbon Life Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Mark, and with me, live in the Bourbon Life Studios, my good friend, Matt. You know, Matt, I always ask, how you doing tonight? You know, I can tell you're doing great.
I am.
Are you having fun?
Are you having fun? I'm going to cut you right off there. I'm having a great time.
Yeah. How's that for a question? Are you having fun tonight, Matt?
I'm having a blast tonight. And I am also not Denny Potter, but we do have with us Denny Potter and Jane Bowie, the master distiller and head of innovation and blending from Maker's Mark. And they've come back so graciously to join us on round and or session number 3. And what do we have poured up on this round?
I believe 46 cast is what you guys. I mean, if we were in person, it's much easier. But that's one of the tough things.
Very true. Well, we put you on the spot. You passed that one.
Yeah.
So it is like 46
sure
cast.
They got 46 cast. Yeah.
Yeah. We're gonna make you guess. Hey, Denny, guess what we poured up this round?
That's what I'm tasting right now. Can you actually do that? God damn, he's good. Look at
He's real good.
46 cast, Mark. I know it.
The great Karnak himself. There you go. Yeah, so it's the 46 cast strength. Again, same mash bill that we talked about earlier with the wheated mash bill. Now this one steps up again, another couple of proof points. This one is a 111.2, I think. Is that right, Matt?
Oh, nice.
That is right.
Yeah. So now that is a little bit higher. We can talk about that too, because Makers, you guys are kind of unique in that aspect because bourbon, most people know, can't go into the barrel higher than 125. A lot of distilleries choose to go into the barrel at that strength, but Maker's Mark is different. You guys go in lower. So you want to kind of talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, at Makers, we go in the barrel at 110 proof. It's what we've always done when we did the first barrel in 1954. That's what we went in at. And so, for us, we're tied to our taste vision that obviously was created back then. And we're a stickler for, not changing process, which could impact obviously that taste profile. So, we go in at 110. For us, adding a little bit more water to it, and then the access to, obviously the char and the caramelized sugars and everything within the barrel, it just creates for us that perfect taste profile. And we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but one of the things we know is if we went in at 125, it would be a different whiskey. So, and I'll let Jane talk about the project because she was intimately involved in that.
Yeah.
When I was gone for a little bit, but
Your sabbatical.
my
bro.
sabbat, yeah. Whether that was in St. Croix or at Heaven Hill, but here's what I will tell you. You know, being an ops guy, and you know, I'm plant manager. I mean, listen. I mean, I don't know if I've talked about the title master distiller, but
You've not yet said it's bullshit.
it's. I mean, it's a title. You know, born
Right.
in marketing, right? There are a lot of people that have the title. Some don't even have distilleries, right? It's real easy to give yourself that title. But, you know, I've always been directly tied to the operation side of things. And so, you know, I've been plant manager as VP of Ops at Heaven Hill, which means guess what I get to do? I get to create budgets. I get to operate to a budget. And I also get tied to cost savings exercises at
Super
times.
sexy
Right.
stuff.
But here's why this is important, because about every 3 or 4 years, we have some accountant or finance person that wakes up in the middle of the night and thinks, I've got a cost saving exercise. If we went in the barrel at 125 instead of 110, we would need less barrels, less warehouse space,
And you'd have more whiskey.
and I would save us all this money, right? And it is a correct statement. If we went in at 125, there is no doubt, just from barrels, we would save probably $5 million. You throw in, you know, the warehouse space that's involved, we probably don't need to build that additional warehouse this year. Those are $7 million. So you start getting into this $10 to $13 million price range of what you could save
in a year
going in at 125. It's just the reality of it. That being said, we're always like, okay, you can, if you want to do that, but we've had this taste vision, this taste profile since the 50s. It will change the taste profile. So you get so tired of having that conversation.
Right.
And unbeknownst to me, after I had left the first time, is when, you know, Jane got involved, and it was kind of, and you can kind of talk about the evolution of this, you know, DNA project, but it really wasn't about anything we were ever going to release. But
so is now a good time to talk about, I guess we're here.
Yeah, we're here. I
literally, we were, I mean, he set you up so perfectly.
Okay. So
he teed it up. It's there for you.
Denny's right. So it's a lot of makers is guardianship, right? I mean, you have these multi-generational employees that live and breathe this teeny tiny distillery and brand that started in the middle of Kentucky. And so in 2013, we just started asking, like, what matters and what doesn't matter, right? I mean, you have all these things we do, and I always laugh. You go into the distillery with Denny's team and you say, like, hey, you know, Teresa, why do we still propagate the yeast this way? And Teresa will go, I don't know. It's just the way we've always done it. Like, they're still literally using the sheet that Denny wrote the first time in 2003, 2004.
2003.
No one had ever written down how to propagate the yeast.
Well, so because Steve Nally was our, you know, he was our longtime master distiller.
He just knew
how. He did it. So I'm like, Steve, before you leave
or die or whatever,
I have got, because he announced that, you know, he was retiring. I said, I have got to write this process down. Like, I've got to follow you through it. Like,
because no one had ever written anything down. Like, wow. I'm not joking. They literally, when they change out a doubler or change a still part, they just Sharpie it on the wall. So the whole timeline of our still history is just Sharpied on the wall at Maker's Mark.
Yeah.
So Denny comes back in 2018 and they're still using the exact same sheet of paper to follow the yeast. Anyway, that was a different story. So Diane, you know, was very much quality manager. Quality is like the least, it's the most thankless job, I think, at a distillery, because you're just a bulldog having to like nag and care about everything. And nobody wants to deal with the quality team, right? And she was amazing. So she put this project together just to understand the role of entry proof. And I didn't know a ton of the history. And I actually learned from Mike Beach called him when we started this project and was like, talk to me about why entry proofs change. Like, why would we have gone in? And really, it was just 1953, 1954, when they started Maker's Mark, 110 was the max. So I'd love to be like, they just knew it was, but they didn't. That was just the max at that time. What happened is in 1962, the law changed to say you can now go in at 125. He was already set in his whiskey, so he wasn't going to change it.
Okay.
So we had just never looked at it. Diane, exactly what Denny said. This is an area like you could get some real cost savings, but what does it do to the actual whiskey? Like, we don't know. We don't know how important it is. So she put together a project. It was a 100-barrel experiment where we took one batch of distillate and cut it to 4 different entry proofs. So we did our classic 110. We did the industry standard at 125. And then we split the difference with 115 and 120. Okay. And we took these 100 barrels and we put them in the same place, in the same warehouse, and we left them. And we rotate. We chose the only non-rotating floor in this one warehouse. And we said, we're going to neutralize every other variable and we're just going to see what happens. And we knew they would be different. I don't think we envisioned that we would make 4 totally unique whiskeys. And so 6 years in, Diane was done, like learned everything I needed to learn. Quality was like, we feel good. We have analytics. We've tasted. We've kept samples. We got to figure out how to blend them off.
Yeah, we tasted the accountants and the finance people. That's all we wanted. Like, it was one thing for us to talk about it. It was another to let them taste it. Be like, now you tell me that this is the same whiskey, right?
Right.
So
right.
You were back when we finished, rounded that project out. And then it was like, innovation would like this project. We would like to take ownership.
Yeah. The master of maturation and director of innovation would like to take ownership.
So we really felt like, gosh, this is, in my opinion, it's one of the most interesting things we've ever done, if not the most interesting thing we've ever done. Because when do you ever get to taste the same whiskey with something, with one variable different? Like, right, we just did in proof. You just were like, hey, this 101's different. Imagine how different on the front end. And I think the science behind it was so fascinating because the 110, water's the universal solvent. To Denny's point, that 110 just had more of everything. It was just the flavor intensity. And so we released them as a set here at home in Kentucky. We kept them at their natural proof. We did taste them at all the same proofs. But we just thought, when are you ever going to get to buy 125, 26 proof Maker's Mark? Never, because all that learning 8 years, we're not changing a fucking thing. Like, that's what we learned. So it was, and Diane, we love talking about Diane. She took over quality from Denny in 2004. Mm-hmm. And really, she passed away before we ever released this project. She had a long, hard battle with cancer. And it was really kind of bittersweet to like be able to share her work, because she was one of those unsung heroes that people she was so responsible for so much on this brand and people didn't know who she was. But we've been able to really like celebrate her, tell her story, and she's amazing.
That's very cool. And I appreciate you sharing that backstory as well. So it's more, it was more than just like, hey, we're just going to try this to see what happens. I mean, there was obviously a method behind that madness. And I unfortunately did not get to taste those, but I'm curious, obviously, because we've had the 101.
You guys, you're in Lexington, right?
Come down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously. All right.
I mean, pick a day. Let's do it.
You'd be blown away by how different they are.
Yeah, that's awesome. So speaking of flavor and tasting, Matt, I guess we should talk about what we pick up on the nose on this cask strength 46.
I get a lot more stone fruit on the nose with this than we've had yet. I get like plum and a little bit of fig, like darker fruits as well. But there's also a toasted sugar, like a toasted fruit sugar.
Oh yeah,
that I'm picking up, like caramelized fruit sugar with it as well. Like a little bit of toasted marshmallow, but it's also got some savory notes to it as well.
Yeah, and I get some. Is it rancio? Is that the pronunciation?
It is rancio.
Yeah, you get a little bit of that, a little bit of interesting. Yeah, see, Denny, I can bust out a few big.
but Mark, you're already better than me.
It's more of a Scotch descriptor than a bourbon descriptor usually.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So, but it was like, you picking at those notes like that. And I guess, because it is that one, this is 111, right, Matt? Yeah.
Yep.
111.2. So this one actually went up a little bit in proof because it went in at 110. Now you mentioned that you rotate the barrels, and we talked about that, Denny, before, but that is really unique. Is there anybody else that does that in the industry?
Not to that scale.
Yeah, not to that scale. I mean, honestly, and nobody that I know of. I mean, it's, listen, I mean, I'll get up on my pedestal when I talk about, how we do things. We're a pretty good sized distillery that's been around a long time, and how we do things would be very challenging for somebody that does one barrel a day. So, barrel rotation is one of those. Like, that's just it's something you got to commit to having that uniformity for every barrel that comes out of that warehouse post maturation. A lot of labor that's involved in that. But for us, it's just, how we've done things and that commitment to, quality and consistency.
Yeah. And we talked about that before, Denny, when you're on, but I'm just going to do my brief summary of what it is and tell me if I'm right. But you've got your warehouses are 6 floors. Mm-hmm. So you've got barrels 1 through 6. And then after 3 seasons, basically, you'll take the barrels at 6 and move them down to 1 and move 1 to 6 and 5. Nope. No. Jane's shaking her head. Yeah, I already got it wrong.
So all of our newly filled barrels start out in floors 4, 5, and 6.
Oh, okay.
So then after 3 summers, 6 goes to 1, 5 goes to 2. Depending on the warehouse, 4 and 3 may not need to be rotated. So,
okay.
But yes, they will all start, at the top of the warehouse or towards the top of the warehouse.
You
were close. You were close.
I'm close, right? The accountant
home stretch, yeah. Like the horse that I was betting on Friday.
Not that I'm an accountant, but I'm adding up the cost of everything here that we're talking about. 110, we're talking about the barrels, we're talking about the rick houses that are involved with that, and now we're talking about all these people that are moving these barrels. Yeah. So that's a lot. Plus, we won't even talk about the 30 million or so bottles that get hand dipped.
Yeah,
right,
how ridiculous is that?
That's insane. I mean, I went back and listened to.
I was telling a group on Thursday that was down. We had some of our distributor partners, and what we're distilling today obviously is a lot more than what we're selling today, but that's because that's what we're going to sell. I mean, that's the projected demand. So for us on the bottling side, it's expensive to buy new equipment. Can it be difficult to identify the type of equipment you want, install it, do all that? Yes. What keeps us up at night is, how are we going to hand dip 60 million bottles? Not if, how.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's the stuff that it's one thing to worry about, increasing your capacity and having to ship all these additional cases. It's another to, know that you're going to stick to this, and how in the hell are we going to do it? And we've got plans. I mean, we kind of know, but man alive, it'd be a lot easier just to say, screw it. Let's automate that process.
Yeah. Here's a machine, a robot that can just dunk that bottle and flip it.
But the cool thing about it is it's not just, me or Jane that are sitting here thinking it's not if we're going to do it, right? It's how. But you go talk to the people that are actually dipping the bottles, and if there's even a thought that it's not, that we're thinking of if, that's a big no. Like, there is a commitment and a passion around that. Like it's one thing, like everybody talks about the passion around distilling, and that's kind of the glamorous side, right? Packaging, like, goddamn, just get it in the bottle and get it out the door. That's not the case for us. Yeah. There is just as much passion on the packaging side as there is in any other part of our process. The distillery, the barrels. I mean, it's crazy because you normally don't see that with packaging.
Yeah, and that's great. It's funny because this weekend, I know there was another distillery that some bottles were released at a local liquor store. It's a single barrel that people go kind of crazy over, and it's one of the oldest single barrels. And their labels were always handwritten. Where the bottles were, what barrel number it was, et cetera, et cetera. And now all that information is printed by computer on those labels. So there comes a point where you have to make those decisions. Look, are we going to invest the time and resources to keep this tradition alive, to keep this, or are we going to automate some things just to save time, but also to get more product out? So it's got to be a tough choice to have to make.
Here's the thing though, Mark, like if you're committed to that and it's already chiseled in stone, it's not that. Again, if you take the if out of it, then you're just focused on one thing, right? Like if is a part of it, yes, can be difficult, right? Because you're like, yeah, but if we automated, right? If you take that part out of it and you're just focused on how it's part of our DNA. It is absolutely part of our DNA. We've got these things that we're never going to change.
There are a lot of non-negotiables.
Yeah, it's a non-negotiable.
And then let's go spend energy on the things we do feel like are negotiable.
Yeah, if it's not even an issue, it's never going to become an issue. You just do it.
And trust me, I mean, accountants and finance people
and attorneys, those damn attorneys, don't forget to throw those guys in there, right?
Yeah, they can either help or hurt. Yeah.
So we were talking about the 46. We're drinking, obviously, and there's been a change with that this year. I think it was this year as well. So the 46 always had that kind of like the private select barrel bottles, that kind of longer, I don't want to say sexier, but kind of that curvier shape to it. And so the 46 has switched to more of the classic Maker's bottle design. So can you talk about that? What was what went on with that decision? How was that made? What was the driving factors for that?
You want this one? You start. Well, I'll chime in.
It's interesting. This was one that was hotly debated even internally. And I think a lot of it was, you talk about our bottles, and Denny was just talking about packaging. I think it's impressive we dipped 30 million bottles. What I think is more impressive is we print and hand cut about 100,000 labels a day. On site. Like we still print all of our own labels on site, and people don't realize that. And we have
not know that.
Yeah, we have this old filing cabinet where we have different die cuts for different regions and different labels. And so the one thing that the 46 bottle, it's sexy, it does all these things, but it never felt right to all of us internally. And when you look at that packaging, that was Margie Samuels, right? We are not sitting here without Margie Samuels naming the whiskey, all of the marketing work she did. And I will tell you, for 10 years, that bottle, we have never been emotionally connected to that package, like internally. Okay. And there's a lot of debate about how much you care about what a consumer insights person tells you and how much you have to care about your guardianship and where you're going. And so we started talking about changing this package a few years ago.
Yeah.
And it was really just, how do we make it feel more like it belongs in the Maker's Mark family? Because this product, I'll tell you, this product started as a hobby. It's a stupid name. It's a weird story. It's hard to make. It's expensive. Our warehouse team fucking hates this product. But the juice was so good. It was successful in spite of all of our best efforts to never do anything with it. You would come on the tour and we wouldn't even talk about it the first 2 years of its life. So it was this redheaded stepchild, pun intended. And suddenly it was people love this brand. We love this whiskey. We need to tell the story better, and we need to make it feel more connected to Maker's Mark. So it was really an internal, this package has felt very disconnected from Maker's Mark.
Okay.
And do you want to talk about some of the other changes?
Well, I mean, it's very confusing. Like, people love the bottle, but they had no idea what it was, right? I mean, you're just looking at this and it's, got this big 46 on it.
Right.
A real
Mhm.
story of, what the actual liquid is. Now, from a packaging standpoint, it made a lot more sense. The problem with the old bottle from a packaging standpoint is when you've got kind of that rounded and it rounds up more towards the shoulders, is you can get a tipping issue with that bottle on the bottling line, right?
Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
that could be an issue. So when bottles tip on a bottling line, that's not good because you're concerned about chipped finishes and other things. Again, the packaging side is not the sexy side of the business, but it is the one that gives you the most headaches. So there was that piece too. And it literally was, I mean, no joke. Like there's a guy that I've known for a long time and he texted me today and he said, "Hey man, should I buy this French oaked makers?" I mean, I'm no joke, today. And so I took a picture of the new package. I'm like, "You mean this one?" And he's like, "Yes." I'm like, "That's Makers
It's
46."
Makers
Like,
46.
but the fact that he said he led with French oak
right.
makers,
Right.
because nobody knew that in the those French oak staves. It's such a big part of that.
And even
that
if you don't know,
process
and even if you don't know the flavor it adds, you kind of understand, okay, this is different. I kind of get why and how it's different. I can kind of understand. And we
Right.
felt like the package needed to tell the story
Yes.
better. And all of us had a ton of heart for going back for putting a label on it. Honestly,
Yeah.
I know that
the
sounds
paper,
crazy.
yeah.
But that label paper, all my notepads, we make our own notepads at the
Yeah.
distillery.
Well, yeah, and from a quality standpoint, I mean, these Makers 46 bottles, the old ones, they come in pre-decoed, right? Because we can't do that. So
Right.
we couldn't control the quality outside of, we could reject it.
Right.
We could reject it, but if we're supposed to run 4,000 cases that day and we're having to reject 700 cases because there's an issue with the deco, like it just causes disruptions. But when we can control the labeling, just all of those aspects of quality, it makes it so much easier from a process standpoint.
I think it looks great. I don't know.
I like it.
I don't know what you all think. I mean, it was a big change after a decade of this bottle.
Right.
But I mean, we're all super pleased with how it turned out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it looks great. I don't have a bottle of it myself, but I've seen the bottles. And of course our podcast listeners can't see.
Yeah, that's true. I'm looking around like we're going to show it.
you can show us, but nobody else is going to see it. Denny, we appreciate that. But
Those of you missed it, Denny's been doing bottle tutorials for the guys.
Yeah.
No, we appreciate that. So, Matt, let's talk about the palate and the finish on this one. What do you think?
I get a lot more heat up front on this one.
Do you?
Yeah, I
Okay.
do. I can pick up a little bit more of the proof. And then the real strong flavor for me that I'm picking up is like almond biscotti. It's got a little bit of a nuttiness and kind of, I wanted to say like graham cracker, but some sort of like a crackery sweet, like the wheat comes through that way. And it's got like that almond biscotti and then a nice long warm finish to it as well.
Yeah. I would say this one, man, that FAEO2, that was so good. But this one might be my favorite.
Wow.
Yeah, I really like this 46. Now, this was 46 was kind of, that was Bill Jr.'s baby. Is that right? I mean, that was kind of his.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, I think, Denny, you described it because we had the regular 46 2 years ago when we were on the show. And I think you described it as Makers on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. That's kind of, because that was obviously back when I was around the first time, and it was 2008 when Bill, basically came to the team, which at that point was mainly myself and Kevin Smith, and said, "Hey, here's what I want to do, and I don't want to bastardize what my parents did because it's damn good bourbon, right?" And he said he wanted to just, build upon that, enhance it, and that's kind of how he described it. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I think I remember you'd said that he did not want it to be cask strength, right?
Hates cask strength bourbon.
Okay, that's what I thought. So how'd you guys get to the point where you're like, hey, we're going to be able to do this now?
So the first time we did it, this is so funny. So he hates cask strength bourbons. And what's interesting about 46, I don't think there's any two bourbons at different proof points that could be more different. Like Matt, I wish you nailed it. It's fig, it's a ton of caramel and a ton of almond. Those are my taste, like always. Where the 46 at 94 proof is really more vanilla and baking spices. Like that, they're just totally different whiskeys. So Bill turned 80 years old in June of 2020. And we decided, just because it's Bill and he's given everybody a hard time his entire life, to celebrate his 80th birthday, we would release a cask strength expression of 46. And we would go on a tour with him where we would release it. And we would have these roasting charity events where people could pay to roast the shit out of Bill Samuels. And we had this whole big plan to celebrate his 80th. And then obviously COVID.
Right.
So we ended up releasing it. And then it is a really, Mark, I think it is one of the best whiskeys we make, if not the best whiskey we make. And it was, people just loved it. So it's not around this year. I'm hoping we will make it an annual release. It'd be fun to do it around Bill's birthday or Father's Day, because they're kind of the same time. But it's just, but he hates it. He still, like, he won't drink it. It's not his thing. But yeah. And then we do it also in a tri-pack. That might be where you guys.
Right. That's what I got. It was a tri-pack. Yep.
But it's definitely not with his blessing, put it that way, which makes it even better. So
like, happy birthday, and we're just gonna screw you over.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, F you.
Yeah.
Which is perfect for Bill.
Perfect.
I mean, the distributors were like, we will raise so much money roasting the shit out of him. I can't wait.
Oh gosh. Well, hopefully, 85 will just be 3 years away now, right? So
yeah,
maybe that'll work out. So, Matt, final thoughts on this one. What do you think?
I love it. I think my favorite of the night's been the FAE02, but this is a great expression, and it really is different from the regular 46 that you were talking about, Jane. Kind of two completely different ends of the spectrum on the same whiskey, which is really unique.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we have reached the end of the show, guys. Believe it or not, it's gone by so fast. Thank you all so much. It's been a lot of fun. But so before we wrap it up, any final thoughts? I want to ask you this though, both of you all. What has been the most fun part of this journey for each of you so far? Is there one thing that just stands out that you enjoy the most about it?
I mean, there's fun in like the liquids we've released, and then there's fun in just enjoying the day to day. I mean, and that's the God's honest truth. I mean, to be able to do what we do every day, and to be able to work with Jane and Beth, and to go taste and build towards something we know we're going to release, like that. I enjoy the journey so much. Like, I enjoy the process. I mean, that just means everything to me. And I never take it for granted. Like, it's just an incredible thing. And so for me, that's kind of how I would answer that. But I mean, I think from a liquid standpoint, I think Community Batch has probably been
the most inspiring.
One of the most inspiring, coolest things that I've been a part of.
Yeah. Very cool.
I was going to say the people. I mean, I think I love the whiskey. I mean, the whiskey is, but I mean, we work in an industry with just really good people. And especially what you said, our day to day, and we have a really fun team, and our team rarely feels like work. So
we have so much fun. I mean, you come in, you can't tell if it's a production meeting or if we're roasting somebody. I mean, but we get a lot done. I mean, we're pretty good at what we do.
But.
Yeah. You're hand dipping 30 million bottles. You're doing something right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. One final thought that I had though, Denny, the first time you were on the show, I'd ask you a question about if you could name a bottle. At that time, it was right after Father's Day, and I had done a post about the different Black Blantons and H. Taylor, the male names, and I'd ask you about if you could name a whiskey after a woman, who would it be? And of course, you said Margie Samuels, but then you also actually said Jane. So I'm just curious. I know, isn't that sweet, Jane? I don't know if you knew that. You may not. You probably didn't listen to it.
She doesn't listen to any of the podcasts.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I don't either. But so hey, so are we going to see the Jane special anytime soon coming out of Maker's Mark? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Well, I mean, the wood finishing. I mean,
There you go. Yeah, that is
the next whiskey drop.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the next whiskey drop is actually.
And I forgot to talk about that, but real quick, the whiskey drop is it's basically a subscription service, right? So is that 4 times a year?
I think so.
Yes, for right now.
Will be. Yeah.
It's 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it's it's 2 bottles, like
it
3.
is. It's 2 bottles, and they're usually special releases, either designed for that community or, like Entry Proof was in there, the wood finishings. And then we'll do virtual tastings, and we're kind of still finding our way a little bit. So if anybody listens, like, we encourage feedback to make us better, because this is a very new space for us. So it's always, everything's clumsy in the beginning, right? So
sure.
But it's been really fun. Like, it's a very captive audience. I host a tasting every quarter with a release, and like, it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, I subscribed today, as a matter of fact. So I'm a new subscriber
to this next one.
I guess we can tell.
Yeah, the 2 bottles are one is a private select that Jane did.
That's my palate.
And then one that I did.
And our palates are awful. So we're gonna, I don't know that there's a voting mechanic, but I don't know that there isn't a voting mechanic.
You'll figure it out.
I'm just kidding.
That's going to be great. So my first drop's going to be a really interesting combination of bottles. That'll be a lot of fun.
Or just you guys come to the distillery and we can.
Okay.
We'll put you on the spot, like face to face. We'll put.
I can already tell who's gonna like what based on what they like tonight.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, hey, we'll come anyway just to confirm it.
I was going to say we'll show up.
Taste all the things.
All right. So final thoughts before we wrap it up. Jane, Denny, you guys got anything you want to add before we get out of here?
Just thank you guys. It's fun talking to people that are, interested in what we're doing, and then just always hearing from you guys. It's a good time. I appreciate you letting me tag along tonight.
Yeah. And next time, let's do this face to face, right?
Yeah.
I think we're finally getting into that arena where it's okay to do that, and we'd love to do this at the distillery or anywhere you guys would want to meet. But I thank Jane for joining at the last minute. It's always fun. Like I said, you could literally put a microphone in the innovation lab or probably my office, and you're going to get very similar conversations.
So it would be like the NFL. They have the NFL mic'd, where the players are mic'd up. So you can mic Jane and make a whole little series off of that.
Yes. Yes.
All right, Matt, final thoughts before we close it up tonight.
Hey, Jane and Denny, thanks for taking the time to chat with us and all of our listeners tonight. It's always a great time to hear from both of you and to get to try what you all are doing at the distillery. And I just really enjoy sitting around chatting with real people and just having a good time, kind of being serious, but clowning around more importantly. So thank you both so much for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. It's great. Jane, thank you for just being the surprise guest. We were looking forward to hanging out with Denny, but to get you on the show at the same time, this was just a real treat. I really, really appreciate it. We've enjoyed the shows we've done in the past, but it's just nice to get you both together. And it was a lot of fun. So really, really appreciate that. And with that said, I do want to thank all of our sponsors. We appreciate everything that they do for us as well. And please, if you guys have any questions or comments, please reach out to us. You can email us at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. You can always find us on Instagram and Facebook. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. We would really appreciate that. And with that said, I want to wrap it up, send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.
Whether it's rye, sour mash Tennessee whiskey, or bourbon, Davidson Reserve has something delicious to offer any whiskey lover's palate. Pick up a bottle of one of our award-winning Davidson Reserve whiskeys from your local retailer today. Visit www.davidsonreserve.com for more information. And cheers to drinking local.